Welcome everyone to Putney Student Travel's first webinar of 2021. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of things for you to keep in mind. If you get disconnected from this presentation, just go back to those original emails that we sent you and try logging back in through Zoom. If your issue seems to be more about bandwidth, try closing out all the tabs on your computer and disconnecting other devices you may have from your Wi-Fi. If you have questions during or at the end of this, if you get bumped off, or at the end, if you still have questions that were not answered, please give us a call at the office. We would love to talk to you. Our number there is 802-387-5000, and we would love to answer any remaining questions. But if you have questions during this webinar, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom to ask those questions, and we'll either respond directly to you or we will address the question throughout the presentation. We do recommend speaker view for this webinar. It should be the default, but you can also change your view at the top right-hand corner. You should have the option to change to speaker view. All right, we look forward to spending the next 45 minutes with you, and I'm going to let our main presenter, Patrick Noyes, take it away.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. My name is Patrick Noyes. I've been with Putney for 20 years. I went to Georgetown University and ended up studying and living in Spain for 5 years. And with Putney have designed a number of programs, led programs in places like Spain and China, Argentina, Malawi, and I have also been involved with hiring of our leaders. I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much for coming to listen and ask questions. I do want to acknowledge that this is a particularly difficult and challenging time. It seems that the unexpected has sort of become normal, and in the case of yesterday, something formerly unthinkable became both possible and real. So I know that it might seem that student travel is a small thing within the much larger backdrop of everything that's happened. Perhaps thinking about getting back out and connecting in person with people is sort of a beacon of hope or a glimmer to hold on to. So, and I do think that Putney, because of our history and because of the way we're structured, and because of the way we approach travel, we're uniquely structured to be able to navigate times like this. So I also want to acknowledge that a number of the people who are watching right now are actually Putney alums, veteran leaders, students who are currently enrolled in our programs, a lot of students who were hoping to travel with us last season and have instead, rolled over and are now going to be traveling with us, hopefully, in 2021. And of course, there are some people who are new to Putney Student Travel. So while I will be describing a little bit about who we are as an organization and what kind of programs we run, we're really going to focus today, me and my colleagues, on COVID, on what travel looks like today, the unique challenges of the moment. And so I'm going to structure this conversation a little bit around the timeline of past, present, and future. I'll start briefly with our distant past and explain Putney Student Travel's origins and history, and then we'll go to the recent past of this past summer and fall and the programs that we were able to successfully run, how we did it, what we learned from it. And then we'll talk about the present, what our thinking is about our programs right now, what changes we've made, what our programmer team and in-country contacts are doing to respond to the moment. And then we'll talk about the future. With all this uncertainty, how do we manage that going forward towards this spring and summer? I mentioned along the way, I'll be joined by several colleagues, Olivia Shumlin, John Lindsley, and Jeff Shumlin, along with Rebecca and Julian, who are helping out with questions and answers. And I'll leave it to them to briefly introduce themselves before they begin. You can type in questions to the Q&A whenever you feel like it, and Rebecca and Julian will let us know at the end if there are questions that have not been addressed or should be readdressed or gone in more depth. But the whole presentation should take no more than about half an hour, and then we'll go to those questions. Thank you. As I mentioned, I want to start out sort of with the long history and looking at Putney Student Travel as an organization. This is our 70th year. We were founded by George and Kitty Shumlin in the wake of actually another calamity, which is the division and destruction of the World War II wrought. And Kitty and George, brought a group of high school students on a boat for 10 days to Europe to travel for almost 3 months. And the travel was forged on the notion that making connection and unifying people with meaningful in-person interactions was going to be the way to sort of re-piece together society from the rubble that was World War II. And so now, I think when our interactions like this presentation right now are necessarily mostly virtual, mostly distanced, that foundational notion of how important and transformational experiential learning can be, that is more vital now than ever. What this long history means is that we do have sustainable and long-term relationships with the communities that we work with the places that we go. This is a picture of Tanzania we've been going to for over 20 years. We have this wonderful group of women, the mamas, who help welcome our groups to our villages there. They know what it's like to help acclimate our students to village life, to the food. It is now the sons and daughters of the original mamas in those same villages, who are greeting our students. The history also involves it being a family-run organization. George and Kitty are there on the right of your screen. Jeff, who you'll hear from soon, is on the left. In the middle, Peter Shumlin, who many of you know, he was the governor of the state of Vermont for 6 years and has recently returned to Putney Student Travel to help sort of guide us through these times. And Peter's daughters, Olivia and Becca, have joined the Putney Student Travel Barn as third generation. So it means that we have a lot of experience to draw on. This is another great example of Putney Student Travel's long history. I think Jeff, when he was leading a language program in France, snapped this picture about 30 years ago. My wife, Karen, who also happened to lead that same program, snapped this picture without realizing that Jeff had done an analogous one 30 years earlier. And you can see how there's a real through line of the things we do, the places we go. And we talk about, I mentioned already several times, a student travel barn. It is an actual barn. We, as everybody, had to go remote back in March of last year. So there are only a few of us in the barn right now, but it is a real place. It's on a dirt road in southern Vermont. In normal times, we love to have, and we often have, family, alums, leaders stop by in the winter on their way to go skiing, or in the summer to take a jump in the pond out back. But then as now, one of the things that's really important is whether it's the real roof of the barn or whether the virtual roof of the barn, everyone, the people that you talk to when you call Putney Student Travel, you email Putney Student Travel about a program that your son or daughter is going on, are the ones that are creating the trips. They're in direct touch with our contacts and our communities. And that structure gives us a lot of knowledge and flexibility that's very different if you're, there's not a call center that you're calling that has no idea what is going on in the actual place where you're talking about. It also means that we learn from each other and draw from each other's experience. I think about a couple of years ago in the middle of our busy summer season when we have literally thousands of students out in the world on dozens of different trips at any given time. I did a quick back of the napkin calculation, and sitting in the barn, responding to anything that came up in the moment, talking to parents, helping to coordinate certain things with leaders, abroad. There were over 100 years of experience sitting there, talking on the phones, troubleshooting things that were happening at any given time. And so that history, that structure, and that experience really gives us a lot of confidence that we can make safe decisions and travel in a way that is safe, sustainable, and conscious of the moment. So I want to, and so I'm going to turn it over to Liv Shumlin to talk in just a second a little bit about the recent past, but just to kind of give some context, as with most organizations, last March, we suddenly, found the need to abandon the barn, go remote fully. We had already been in touch with our programs in China. We had canceled those programs, but we made the decision at that point to push all of our deadlines back for deposits and other things, and give our families, this is last spring, the flexibility to make decisions without the pressure of deposits or deadlines. And as time moved on, we did end up canceling the vast majority of our programs. And when we did, we gave full refunds to everyone who was in those programs. Because again, we wanted to make sure that the decisions that they were making, we were making, were not predicated on the economics of it. It was the right thing to do. And so we were able to run a few programs, which Liv is going to talk to you a little bit about. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about how we've adapted our policies and procedures regarding enrollment and admissions, knowing what we do from last year. So I'm going to turn it over to Liv right now.
Thanks, Patrick, and hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. I'm Olivia, and I'm one of the program directors here at Putney, and also a part of the Putney family as third generation, along with my sister, Becca. And I'm just going to elaborate a bit on what we did this past spring and tell you a little bit about what I had the pleasure of being a part of on the ground firsthand through Putney this summer. So within the context that Patrick mentioned, having to cancel all of our programs, refunds this spring leading up to the summer, during that time we kept in extremely close contact communication with our families, as we typically do, but even more so given the time of COVID that we were in. And this spring, and in these conversations, we received an outpour of feedback from students, alumni, parents, asking if we can offer anything COVID safer away from Zoom that allows for hands-on learning, interaction with peers, and asking if there's any way for students to experience the Putney magic this past summer. And so we took this feedback, and under our pre-college structure, we created a large campus-based program with a really robust health and safety protocols for 350 high school students and middle school students, with over 40 instructors and leadership staff right here in Vermont. So we brought our veteran leaders and instructors, incredibly competent at what they do in their various professional lives, really dynamic group of people and educators. And we offered a selection of exciting seminars that were initially inspired from an array of themes pulled from across our broader selection of programs that we would run in a normal year. That of course could be carried out safely and face-to-face in Vermont. So for example, Farm to Table in Italy that Putney's been running for decades became Farm to Table in Vermont. And we had forensic seminars, pre-med and bio, politics, phenomenal social activism seminars, creative writing, sports management, the list goes on, studio art. And so we took over a quaint little liberal arts university in Western Vermont, Castleton University, which is a super rural, picturesque campus. It's spread over 165 acres, ample athletic fields, facilities for art, science, humanities, miles of biking, hiking trails. It was really beautiful, surrounding a campus that wasn't too far from the lake as well. And in part, we carefully chose Vermont because of the semi-unique position Vermont was in at the time as one of the 3 states with the lowest COVID infection rates. And also by working in extremely close coordination with my dad, Peter's connections from state government. So we developed a plan that would allow for us to safely carry out a program in a meaningful way. And I'm not going to walk you through every single detail and protocol, but a few important protocols I should outline. Starting off, all students and staff underwent a very strict 7-day quarantine before the program began, and were then required to share their negative COVID-19 viral test with us, timed as close to their arrival to the program as possible, to ensure that all who arrived on campus were healthy. And within the larger programs, so students and instructors occupied the entire campus while keeping to isolated pods of about 20 to 30 individuals within the larger program. So essentially each pod consisted of 2 to 3 seminars, and really operated as their own family. So social distancing and facial coverings, masks were more relaxed, and they could operate freely within their respective pods. Since we occupied the entire campus, we had dedicated residential and classroom and dining space specific to each pod's use, which was really neat. And obviously masks and distancing when interacting with peers outside of their pod, we'd have, those were required. And we also had a larger outdoor pavilion, which was really neat, and we could utilize for outdoor meetings, open air as much as possible for large group meetings. And I'll just say the pod formation was a really great way for students across various seminars and interests to interact and get to know one another in a safe way, while at the same time aligned with Putney's longstanding mission of super close-knit groups made up of a diverse student body with various backgrounds and experiences and interests, as the best way to cultivate positive group dynamics. Which is exactly what happened. And, we also worked incredibly closely with Rutland Regional Medical to arrange for all of our students and all of our staff to be tested again on campus. So they didn't need to leave 5 to 7 days into the program to ensure all were staying healthy throughout and returned home healthy as well. And as a result, the program was 100% COVID-free and a tremendous success on all fronts. And just being able to be there on site at Castleton throughout the program and having the opportunity to see these students day after day, creating imaginative projects for their seminars, collaborating with their peers, running around outside, playing capture the flag, biking, socializing in the evening around the bonfire, forming incredibly close bonds, all while knowing they had just emerged from a year of pretty intense isolation, made it all the more impactful. And we actually had a number of students in the first week of the program that specifically asked our directorial team if they could take the time on Saturday morning, which is typically under pre-college programs reserved for weekends, late afternoons, evenings, outside of seminar hours, are allocated for extracurriculars and various activities. But these students requested to use that time as a seminar block, which is really neat. And not what one would typically expect to hear from students that just finished up their final semester at school. But I'll say, I believe it was a result of students just being not only deeply engaged in the content, but having a really dynamic, young, fun team of creative, fun, engaging instructors, and having the opportunity to further their learning in person about topics that they're really passionate about. And you could really feel the emotion there and how powerful this experience was for these students. And we were just incredibly proud as an organization to be able to develop these protocols that not only worked, but by fostering the healthiest environment we could, that emphasized face-to-face connection, field-based learning, hands-on in-person experiences, new friendships, and just building this incredible community during a time when students really needed it was pretty profound. And thanks for allowing me to share a bit about this past summer's experience. We are offering pre-college Vermont again for the upcoming summer. Happy to answer questions at the end, and I'll turn it back over to Patrick about what we did moving into the fall. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Olivia. As Olivia said, after the successful completion of the Castleton program, we were hearing a lot from our alumni families, especially our older students who traveled with us in the past, that their college expectations for the fall were getting scuttled, and they really didn't know where to turn. They didn't want to be stuck at home the entire time. So we asked ourselves, well, is there something that we could do in the fall, something that we could do safely where we could actually travel and get out there in small groups, which is what Putney Student Travel does best. At the time, rates were incredibly low in Iceland, we determined, Croatia, and we knew that we could run a safe program up here in New England. So we designed, offered, and ran GAP programs this past fall in Iceland. We actually got special permission from the Icelandic government as an educational institution. You couldn't travel there as a US citizen, but we as Putney Student Travel with our group and our long history in Iceland could. We also ran a program in Croatia. My colleague John Lindsay is going to tell you a little bit about that, and a very successful program in Vermont and Maine around environmental studies and renewable energies. So I'll turn it over to John Lindsay to talk a little bit about how we modified our COVID protocols for an international travel situation.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We're so happy to have you all here. Like Patrick said, my name is John Lindsay. I've been working with Putney in a number of capacities for the last 15 years or so, particularly with our programming in Europe, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. And this fall was a really exciting time. We were able to run a very successful program in Croatia for gap age students, which I'll share a little bit about right now. We went into the fall with one really clear goal in mind as far as health and safety. We wanted to do everything that we could to ensure that nobody came on the program with COVID, and certainly that nobody returned home from the program with COVID. And to accomplish that goal, we asked all of our students to complete a 7-day quarantine prior to the start of the program. And we also asked them to complete a test prior to joining us at the program departure point, which was New York City. And then we found ourselves in a situation where we also had to abide by certain restrictions for entry that Croatia had. And in order to arrive in Croatia and be able to enter and travel freely, a traveler had to present a negative COVID PCR test result that was no older than 48 hours. And so when our students and leaders gathered in New York, we arranged with a private laboratory to come to our airport hotel, swab the entire group, and we had the students and leaders stay in single rooms that evening. We had our results returned the following morning. All of the results were negative, and we then departed from John F. Kennedy International that afternoon, arriving in Croatia the following day with a healthy buffer of about 10 hours. With those test results still valid, we were able to enter Croatia and begin the program. And as a check to ensure that our other basic health and safety measures were working effectively, 5 days into the program, we tested locally, again, a PCR COVID test in Zagreb. All of the students and leaders were negative in that test as well. And our health and safety measures in country, which are really sort of the bedrock of what we followed while traveling. And Liv mentioned some of these previously, were masking when around others who were not part of our immediate group, our immediate traveling unit. Also distancing and a very strict regimen around hand washing and personal group hygiene, as well as avoiding crowds whenever possible, and also eating our meals outside or in other open air environments whenever possible. Just a couple of other things to point out too. We worked really closely with our local contacts, networks, and outfitters in Croatia. And they were very much on board with our approach and very pleased that we were taking such a serious approach to health and safety, and worked very closely with us in the execution of all of these measures. And we brought our leaders of the program together with our team in Vermont virtually for a leader orientation prior to the program, where we walked through all of the fine details of our health, safety, and risk management approach. So I hope that's helpful in giving everybody a sense of how we approach this GAP experience this fall in Croatia. And we had a successful program, and of course, too, when students returned home, we advised all families to follow CDC and or local health guidance for travelers returning home from an international program. Thanks very much for attending.
Thank you, John. So as I mentioned before, this was an attempt to give a look at the past of what we have done. And we've lingered on it because I think it's important. We are one of the few organizations who did run any kind of significant domestic or international program already. And when we say we have experience, we can draw from the real life challenges that we saw and how we overcame them. I'd like to go to my colleague Jeff Shumlin now to talk a little bit about sort of what we are seeing now in the present and how we are thinking of our programs right now and the modifications we're doing to prepare for the upcoming summer.
Am I there?
You're there.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. Great to see you. I'm Jeff Shumlin. Along with Peter Shumlin, we are sort of the middle generation of directors of Putney Student Travel. We've been at it for almost 40 years now. It was in the very early 1980s that we took over from our parents after working with them for some time. It's of course a tremendous joy for me to be sharing this presentation with a member of the next generation, Olivia, and to have her and her sister Becca with us as well, and our now 90-year-old mother next month, still sitting just up the road, asking every day how we're doing. I want to emphasize, I think, something that Liv touched on, which is that the reason we're doing this is that we get tremendously charged by the idea of bringing people together, having them collaborate, share their interests and motivations directly with other members of their group, with communities, and that all of these protocols we've put in place have allowed us to do that. And as you see in these quotes here, the responses that we got to the Vermont program, which when we called people and told them about it, for some seemed seemingly tame and close to home, were overwhelmingly positive. Students were so glad to be able to get out of their rooms, off their Zooms, and interact with their peers. And the fact that we were able to pull that off abroad as well has given us tremendous confidence, and we have learned so much, to the extent that the state of Vermont used some of the protocols we developed with them to set guidelines for reopening camps and things like that. So this combination of protocols of testing, quarantine, the pod structure, social distancing where necessary has really worked, but it's a fluid situation, and we really acknowledge and appreciate that. And what we did in Vermont was so different from what John just described in Croatia a mere 2 months later. One thing about Putney is that we're extraordinarily agile and we're very conservative. Right now, we are preparing for summer with a very keen eye on the progress of and unrolling of vaccines, with a tremendous amount of hope for that, but planning for a situation that is much more akin to last year, just to make sure we're ready. Because we believe in many of our destinations that we can take students to have experiences that are close to normal, even if the vaccine doesn't unroll the way we need it to, or perhaps if it doesn't unroll as it should in the communities that we're visiting. There are moral and ethical things to evaluate about the effectiveness of the vaccine, whether we still carry it, whether people in a village somewhere have had the opportunity to have it themselves. And we are in the midst, our team of programmers is in the midst of communicating with people on the ground, whether it's, oh gosh, I don't know, people who help us with language learning in France, or communities where we do service in Costa Rica. And we're looking at, in the worst case scenario, what can we do? What can we not do? What do we have to change? Is it conceivable that on our French language program this year, maybe we skip the homestay? Well, it's a possibility. And we are laying out all the scenarios so that we're ready to go, so that we can get students out there to have fun together and to interact using these structures that have shown to be successful. I mean, the reason you see so many slides already where students are wearing masks, are not wearing masks, which might seem like a surprise to you, is that there are many instances where this pod structure we've created works. When we're hiking in the Alps, just our group, we don't need to wear our masks. But as soon as we go into a restaurant, we absolutely do, even if we're eating on the terrace. And we've got that stuff worked out, and we feel like, we need to see what happens. We're cautiously optimistic, but we feel like we can achieve these goals, even in the worst case scenario, this coming summer. So we'll plan for that. And hopefully we'll be able to relax our structures and procedures as the summer approaches, because we'll see some success with COVID rates dropping, testing rates dropping. We are watching them on an hourly basis, country by country, community by community, and of course in the United States, where some of the biggest challenges seem to be. So forgive us if we're emphasizing the COVID consideration, but we imagine that it's forefront in your minds, particularly since so many of you know us so well. And if you want to hear more about specifics, I know Patrick will dive a little bit more into some general understanding of Putney, but we are here and you're welcome to call, speak to us individually about the places you want to go, the things that turn you on, and what we think we can do even in the worst case scenario. Welcome. Thank you. Welcome back for so many of you. It's great to have you with us. And we look forward to traveling with many of you this summer.
Thanks, Jeff. And Jeff has already touched on this, but thinking about that future of the summer, we are still dealing with a number of those unknowns. Will our students be able to get vaccinated? Will all of them be able to get vaccinated? Will it be students from certain states? Will other countries let us in? Will members of our host communities be able to get vaccinated? And so, the question is, how do we plan with such uncertainty? And the answer for right now is we're planning to rely on primarily what has worked and what we can control. John mentioned these things: masking, distancing, quarantining, and testing. Vaccination is sort of the cherry on top. It would be wonderful if it turns out that provides us with even more opportunities than we otherwise would have, but we prepare for the most restricted situation, and then hopefully we're able to open it up. Another part of that future planning for uncertainty is making sure that you, as parents and students, don't need to choose between your safety and your investment in the program. So there's structural things like we are making sure that you have a peace of mind, full refund until March 15th, so that you can save your space in the program that you really want to go on to. And if you change your mind for any reason before then, you get a full refund. If at any point before March 15th or after March 15th, Putney Student Travel cancels the program, and you've seen how conservative we are in terms of only running things that we are absolutely sure we can be safe with, you get a full refund. We also allow you the ability to switch seamlessly in between programs in the event of you wanting to do that and there's still room in another program for whatever reason, or if we cancel a program, we will be able to hopefully offer you, different available options. So maybe the program that you really wanted to go on traveling isn't able to happen because of COVID this summer, but you can switch seamlessly into our pre-college Vermont program, what a number of our students did last year. And then with this, and we'll talk about it in just a minute, we have a number of partnerships. You can even switch between those partners. You could move to a National Geographic program or one of our new Smithsonian programs. We also have found and are offering across all of our programs an insurance which does cover COVID and COVID-related complications. So if you get COVID before the program, actually, even without the insurance, if you get COVID before our program, we will give you a full refund. Obviously, you won't come on the program, but we don't want that to be any kind of consideration for you. But even for other things, if you for this insurance, we offer for everyone except for New York residents a cancel for any reason. So you could up to 48 hours before the program decide, even though the program is going forward, that you don't want to go and get a refund of the majority of your tuition. So those are the ways that we are planning for that uncertainty. Before I move on and go into a little bit about the different kinds of programs we run, I know there was a question about what would happen and what plans and what thoughts do we have are in place if someone does get COVID on our program and needs medical attention. So I think John is gonna talk with that, and then I will take us through our different kind of program categories.
Thanks very much for that question. Happy to speak to it. I think I would just start by saying that we have been operating in our destinations in almost every case for a long period of time, and we know these places inside and out, including the local healthcare landscape. And so whether a student was dealing with a health issue related to COVID or otherwise, we are well aware, as are our other local contacts and partners and outfitters that we work with on the ground, aware of things like where COVID-19 testing could be done, local healthcare resources, clinics and hospitals where there are English-speaking medical staff. We also maintain a relationship with International SOS, which is a provider of emergency medical evacuation services, and they're also available for consultation for where to access different medical specialties and care on the ground at our destinations. And I'll also just note too that anytime we deal with a healthcare issue in the field with a student, we are in touch immediately with families, and we are making decisions together on how to proceed with the student, the leaders, the families, and our team of directors at Putney headquarters in Vermont. And specifically to COVID though, you know, it's worth noting that we're certainly going to need to take into account what local protocols and guidance are. What is that destination government saying as far as what needs to happen? And we'll, you know, in any case, you know, be taking that into account. So there's some element of, you know, this being situation and place dependent. Very likely part of the response would be moving the group into single accommodations or isolating the group, quarantining the group in some way, likely together with guidance from local health authorities. And, you know, as I started off, you know, this answer with, we know our destinations very, very well. And so when it comes to, you know, understanding the local healthcare landscape and the systems in place there, we're well ready to, you know, have these types of conversations and problem solve as we need to. But we certainly hope though that our, you know, basic health and safety measures that I spoke to earlier, and which Olivia mentioned in the context of Vermont, can, you know, help us avoid such an outcome.
And obviously in the case of COVID, because it affects the entire group, we would be in communication not only with the affected students' families, but all, you know, families involved in the program. We'd have testing and quarantine measures in place, and, you know, leaders able to stay if there was a need to quarantine in place that went beyond the measure of the program to stay with students. So there's a developed protocols around that, as John said, with the input of like local requirements as well. Great, I'm gonna move on now to talk a little bit about the different kinds of programs, Putney programs that we have. And I'll make some mention about modifications due to you know, COVID considerations for this year. In general, our programs are, with the exception of the pre-college programs, small group trips, and this works really well actually in this environment. We are a natural pod. They tend to be 16 to 18 students, male and a female co-leader. Our service programs are a great example of this. We do, typically in a service program, we live embedded in the community with community donated housing, and we work on a variety of different kinds of projects, infrastructure projects, education projects, environmental ones. Our leaders help our students to develop independent projects based on their own interests and to go further into the ones that we've already established together with the community over the course of their time there, so they really grow and develop. And then typically we'll stay in the villages during the week, and on the weekends we'll travel and get to know the country that the country that we're in. Obviously, modifications for COVID, include the way we approach our housing, the kinds of side-by-side work that we're doing, and limiting certain interactions, making sure that we are not a vector in the community and that there's adequate healthcare above and beyond any COVID concerns, modifying the kinds of projects that we do. But again, we're cautiously optimistic that in a number of our service destinations, this is not only possible, but that we'll be able to make it happen. You can see a lot of our destinations there. We also have our exploration programs, and these tend to be, again, small groups traveling. Putney Student Travel and all that we do is sort of the opposite of a teen tour, and we really are not a get on the bus, get off the bus, check it off your bucket list organization. We're much more trying to find in the places that we go authentic connection that lasts far beyond, hopefully, your time in country. You're going to connect with a person or a place or something that you did or an issue that you saw. And these exploration programs are really great ways to get to know that. They lend themselves to good COVID modifications, as John was mentioning, being able to do things like ahead of time plan for, single rooms or only double rooms, rent out the entire hostel for our group, making sure that we are making modifications that are appropriate to our travel plans. So limiting use of public transportation, having more private transportation, those kinds of modifications. But again, we're cautiously optimistic that a number of our destinations will be able to safely travel through this summer. We also have our language programs. These are immersion, meaning that with the exception of the China program, you're expected to be able to try to speak the target language throughout the program. And Jeff, I think, mentioned before, this is another area in which we are looking at ways where we can modify the way that we do day stays or traditionally home stays to try and provide that same outcome of connection with French families or Spanish families or families in Ecuador that really want to get to know us, but do it without risks, without increasing our risk for COVID or putting our host communities at risk for COVID. And so these are wonderful programs to take language off of the whiteboard and really start to develop a true personal connection with the language that, again, lasts far beyond your time in country. And when you get back into the classroom, you're so much more motivated because you've had these real world experiences speaking the language and using it. We also have a number of career programs. Again, these are small group programs. They're focused on something like sports management in Barcelona or writing in Ireland. They're meant to be things that you think you might have a passion for and that you get a chance to really delve into and develop alongside other students who are interested and leaders who are incredible in their fields. It's another way to travel, to get to know fashion by going to New York and Milan and then put on a fashion show at the end of the program. They're really special programs, and I would highly encourage you to reach out if any of you are interested in those. And then we mentioned pre-college. Pre-college is one of our larger programs, and we have modified the format of it to include podding within the pre-college structure. You get a chance to choose a focus that you get to explore in a smaller group. Our seminars tend to be limited to 10 students. And we have programs both here in the States. We have the Vermont program, UCLA. We have, and I'll talk about this a little bit later when I talk about our partnerships, an incredible partnership with the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health for week-long climate and public health summits. We think there will be a number of students interested in both of those. And you are, again, this is not a replica of well, I mean, certainly now we're in Zoom classrooms, but it's not a replica of what would have been your classroom experience before. It's meant to get you engaged, to get you out of the classroom in many cases, and to get you learning by doing and also by interacting with other professionals, mentors, and other students from across the country, and in many cases across the world, who are also interested in the same things that you are, or give you a chance to explore something that you might not have a chance to do during your regular school time. I'm going to skip into sort of important logistics to know above and beyond the COVID protocols, I will mention that there are a couple of things that that really define Putney programs that are, whether you go on a language trip or a pre-college trip, that they're mentioning. One of them is this incredible pool of leaders that we have. It's one of the reasons why we were so confident in our ability to navigate the waters of the programs this past summer and fall, is that we have leaders who are accomplished in their field and can connect with high school and middle school students and are passionate about sharing their passions. You know, they're not, they're all, they have, you know, college graduate level experience. The average age of one of our leaders is, I think, 29 or 30 years old. More of them have their master's degrees than not. And yet it's not like traveling, you know, with your parents. It really is that you get a chance to see someone in a role as a mentor, and in many cases, you remain in contact with them after the program, and they are someone who really helped to introduce you to something that you might have a passion for that you didn't know, and remain a part of your life far beyond the program. I will also say that we do curate, and I'll get to this when I talk a little bit about our application process. We do curate our groups very carefully, and so meaning that the vast majority of students, over 85% of students, come not knowing a single other student on the program. It means that they're there because they're interested in a certain place or a certain theme, and everyone's in the same boat for the most part to begin with. And we want to make sure that your experience within the group that you're traveling with is the most positive that it can be, so that you can have the best connections outside your group and be the best ambassadors to the places that we go. So to go back to a little bit more of our structures and logistics, we have mentioned this 70-year track record of safety. All of our leaders are CPR and first aid certified. They receive special training from us, not only about COVID, but we do have a big orientation we've been able to do virtually in the last season. We have such a deep pool of veteran leaders to draw from that in many cases, you know, they've had 4, 5, 6, 10 years of leading experience with us. We also do enroll all students in international SOS, which is a way to have emergency evacuation capabilities outside the United States. And as John mentioned, we have these trusted local clinics and healthcare providers that we go to, and in many cases we've identified English-speaking doctors or places that we can go, so that you know, in the worst case scenario, we have someone there who's able to talk with you, able to talk with our leaders, and can provide the level of healthcare that we need. Knock on wood, we very, very, very rarely in our 7 years we ever had to call it into full. Our communication, you are allowed to bring a phone as a student on the program. One of the things we do across all of our programs for the first 5 days is to do an intentional sort of tech fast, which allows the bond within the group to form before we then decide as a group how we're going to relate to our technology and sort of set our own community norms around phone usage and things like that. But you certainly can bring a phone in the program, you have it there for emergency use. And in most places that we go, there is, you know, internet connectivity. We do, even in our most remote destinations, get to a place where there's phone or internet service at least once a week. You can check in with home. But it doesn't need to be active checking in. All of our programs maintain program blogs. In many cases, they're entries written by students or leaders, so that depending on the location, 2 or 3 days, you as a parent or your extended family can log in and check and see what's going on without the need to, you know, be texting or WhatsApping. Although again, you can do that. We also do have a 24-hour emergency line that rings here in the Putney Student Travel barn, and many of our directors, myself, Jeff, or John, will ring by our bedsides at night. It is something where leaders can always be in touch with us, and you can always be in touch with us, no matter what. So that if you need to be in touch, we can work on resolving. We do help organize that international travel component when they're available. And this is one of the things that isn't a little bit in flux due to COVID. Group flights are a little bit different this year than in past years. But we do arrange group flights when they're available, have a leader fly over and back from a destination airport here. So maybe the group meets in New York to fly to Europe, or meets in Miami to fly to Eureka. And we're pretty flexible with those. So if you wanted to travel over and meet your student at the end of the program or use frequent flyer miles for that international travel, we can work with you and make that happen. In addition to the leader flying over, we also have someone who we call our airport representative, who is there on the ground, who is not traveling with the group, in order to troubleshoot on the day of arrival and departure. If you're coming back from Costa Rica and your connecting flight to Chicago from Miami gets canceled, we have someone there who can help you to rebook, who can stay overnight in a hotel with you if need be. So again, it's these many years of travel experience, lead us to these structures we believe makes for the travel. This is an application process, and so when you decide on a program, you do go online to apply. You will create an account, and you will enter in a little bit of information about yourself, some contact information, your first choice program, there's seminar choices, your first choice there, your second choice. And then there's a $700 deposit. Like I mentioned before, that's entirely refundable until March 15th, and for any reason. And then with that deposit, we will hold space for you in your program. Once we hold your space, we'll then email you and say, hey, there was room in your program, your space is held. We just need you to fill in your personal statement, a couple hundred words about why you want to come to the program, why something like this. Our leaders use them in a lot of ways to put the finishing touches on the program, meaning they can really customize it to the student of that particular year, that particular group's interests and desires. And then we ask for 2 teacher references, names and emails of teachers that we contact, and they fill out a short online form getting back to us. Once we have all of those components, we let you know, hopefully that you're accepted. And then once you're accepted, that same login is your digital locker. You can go in there and you'll be able to see your packing list, different travel forms, medical forms that we need from you. So that's sort of your one-stop for all of the information leading up to the program. I mentioned that we have a number of very exciting collaborations, and it's I think both I think it's meaningful that even in these changing times, we actually just a few weeks ago launched a new collaboration with the Smithsonian, and the idea that an institution like the Smithsonian came to and partnered with and trusts Putney Student Travel with their student travel programs, even in times like this, especially in times like this, I think really speaks volumes about the kind of reputation that our programs, I think, have to these institutions. So these are 2 kinds of the Smithsonian programs. They're designed for students in grades 8 to 12. They're crafted around topics that allow intellectually curious students to develop their interests or their passions. And they have destinations ranging from a campus program with seminar focuses in Washington, D.C., with obviously amazing access to Smithsonian curators and buildings and collections, and other international locations that focus in on something like that has a Smithsonian connection. So there's a wonderful program that spends time in New York looking at the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum, and then travels to Denmark to look at international architecture, design. We actually get a chance to collaborate with Lego master builders in Lego headquarters there. Other themes involve social justice. There's one that does air and space that travels between DC and Houston, and all of these have that same small group with a focus, meaningful connections, and they count on both the resources and also the people involved in the Smithsonian. In addition to the leadership on the program, different experts and different people associated with the Smithsonian will be able to interact with and enhance our group's experiences. So that's smithsonianstudenttravel.org, and please, contact us if you would like some more information about those programs. We are in our 13th year of collaborating with National Geographic, an incredibly special collaboration, again, focusing in on those things that you associate with National Geographic: wildlife and conservation, photography, videography, and there are different kinds of programs that we have at National Geographic. We have small group explorations, going to Iceland, for example, to study either photography or climate change and geology. We have very specific, highly focused photo workshops. We have university workshops at places like MIT or Berkeley. We have service programs. And on the vast majority of these National Geographic programs, you get a chance to, again, not only have the mentorship of leaders who are experts in what you're studying, but you also get a chance to interact with a National Geographic expert. So on a photo workshop, in Tokyo, you might work for 10 days with a National Geographic photographer who's been published multiple times in the National Geographic magazine, and they're helping to curate this show of work that you as students do in a public gallery at the end of your program, displaying work that you've created while on that program. They're incredibly special relationships, and again, a lot of those relationships end up going far beyond the program itself and turn into true mentorship along the way. We also are very excited. Last summer would have been our first year of doing this particular collaboration. We had to, for obvious reasons, put it off till this summer. We are working with the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and together putting week-long programs that these actually grew out of a conversation between Peter Shumlin and Gina McCarthy, who was the former EPA chief under Obama, helped to create Harvard C-Chain School, and now has recently been tapped to be the White House climate coordinator under Biden, put together a program that gets students in touch with each other, focusing on different areas of climate activism. It's no longer the case that we're asking ourselves whether climate change is happening. It's what can we do about the climate change that's happening? And so students work in these different action pods, learn about what is going on right now, different strategies for connecting the dots, and then changing that to action, bringing it back to their home communities, and doing so with leading scientists, politicians, thinkers of the day, and presenting these plans for action at the end of the program. Again, we have a summit that is focused on climate change, and also another one on public health. So with that, I'd like to sort of invite all of my colleagues to come back on the call if they'd like to. And if there are any other questions that we didn't get to or that we want to spend a little bit more time with, we can do that right now. I thank you for your time already, and I really appreciate everyone coming to be with us.
Yeah, thanks so much. We do have a couple of questions we saved to the end here. One is, are there specific protocols in place for service and work trips that involve a lot of interaction with communities for this coming year?
I can jump on that if you want, Rebecca.
Sure. Yeah.
I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier. I don't know if that was before the question, but this is one of the places that we have got hyper focus on, and essentially community by community, we are evaluating what we can pull off. And it is true that in some places we will be altering some of the projects we work on. And as John said earlier, the ways that we live. It is conceivable that instead of being in that village housing, we might be in a guest house down the road and come into the community each day to work on projects in ways that are perhaps not quite as interactional, if I can say that, as they usually are. So we're planning for the worst and hoping that both we and they will experience significant vaccine rollout between now and then. But essentially, the worst case scenario will have us being a little more removed, working more on projects that might be a little less interactive than usual in order to make sure we stay safe. And obviously, there are some communities where this is easier to do than others. So if you want to reach out about a geographic interest and talk to us about it specifically, please give us a call.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And then our last question here right now, unless people want to put a few more up, is will someone talk about what the spring gap options are?
I'm happy to jump in there and speak about that. We've got a great lineup of spring gap programs. And if you head to our website, on the top banner, there's a gap button. And on the drop down there, you can read full program descriptions and details for all of these trips. The first departures leave in early March, and we have other departures that don't leave until the middle and end of April. And the programs range anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, actually all the way up to 6 weeks in in length. And I just want to point out that these are all destinations that Putney knows very well. They are all places that we have operated programs in for long periods of times with very strong local networks and resources and outfitters and destination partners that we have a history of collaboration with. And my colleagues and I each see over one or more of these GAP programs. And if there are specific questions about the destinations, we're more than happy to have email or phone conversations. So please reach out. You'll actually find our own director bio and our email addresses at the bottoms of each of those program descriptions.
Specifically, the programs we're offering are to the Galapagos Islands, Morocco, that's a service-based program, Montana and Yellowstone, Costa Rica, Ireland, Iceland, Hawaii, and Croatia.
Great. We also have a question here about the housing for Castleton, what that looks like, and how allergies are handled.
I can take that if you want.
Okay.
First of all, in question of allergies and intolerances, we have a long experience of accommodating just about everything. And, if you have an allergy that is in fact an invitation for an anaphylactic experience, we will reach out to discuss it with you, make sure that we know everything we need to know, that we have extra EpiPens, all that sort of thing. John is actually a specialist on this, but we have a whole team of people who look over the safety and health of each and every student before we leave. So leaders are prepared, materials are in place. We can accommodate almost anything. Gluten-free, not an issue. Vegetarian, lactose intolerant, that kind of stuff we can handle in just about every program. So we're ready for all of that. And it's just a question of calling to discuss it with us so we know what we're getting into. In terms of housing, generally speaking, our trend right now is to use more housing space than needed for fewer people. So that if you look at Castleton, for example, which has bed capacity for 1,100 people, and we put in 350 last summer, that is how we were able to create those independent living pods. We're doing that to a lesser extent as we travel as well, trying to keep to smaller occupancy rooms, larger spaces, good ventilation, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, wherever we can accomplish it, we do want students to have the roommate experience because we think it's extraordinarily important. But right now, we are oriented towards larger spaces for fewer people.
At Castleton, we had each dorm was unique to a pod, and that included staff and students. So only the staff and students on that pod were ever in that dorm. And that also went hand in hand with a number of different protocols regarding eating and distancing during that, and group meetings. But again, we were able to keep, in fact, there were 1,100 spaces at Castleton. We had 350 students over 2 sessions. So at any given time, we had under 200 students in those 1,100 available spaces. One of the nice things about Vermont, we have
taking over the campus. Yeah. Well, that concludes the questions. So I think that's a wrap.
Great. Thank you to everyone. This will be available if you want to take a look at it. We'll send out a link to the video of this. And we do have other sort of presentations that we'll be doing over the course of the next few months, including ones with a panel of our leaders, a panel of students who've been on our program before. So again, thank you for your time and safe travels and be well.